Kotaku senior editor Alyssa Mercante is continuing to play the victim as she attacks gamers in Stellar Blade. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. I wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And before we get into her most recent comments, let's rewind it a little bit. We got to go back to April 19th, where she published and wrote an article over at Kotaku arguing that character attractiveness in Stellar Blade and Hades 2 is, quote, fundamentally different. This is what she wrote. Despite what certain corners of the internet might believe, there isn't a lack of attractive people in modern video games. Baldur's Gate 3 just set a Game of the Year award record, and that game was full of hotties. But when compared to something like Stellar Blade's Eve, the standard bearer for the latest gamer culture war, the manner in which Hades depicts its characters and their attractiveness is fundamentally different. She goes on to argue this. Hades' characters' sexiness is woven into their personalities as much a part of them as their wants, needs, and emotions, and their bodies, however scantily clad or salacious, are not in motion. They cannot be manipulated or posed or peered at from different angles. Instead, it's like you're looking at statues or paintings of these gods and their eternal infinite sexiness. There is desire here, sure, but there is also power and reclamation. There is longing because you only get a tiny little taste of their beauty. Conversely, she describes Eve from Stellar Blade as a sex doll. She wrote, conversely, as Issy van Vandervelde writes for Inverse, a character like Stellar Blade's Eve, like Lara Croft before her, is hot, but she doesn't seem to be aware of it. She's sexy, but she doesn't know it. She's athletic and acrobatic, but entirely controllable. She is a blank slate, a posable sex doll, her bountiful chest heaving during idle animations. She then contrasts this with Hades 2, saying in Hades 2, everyone is horny for each other, and thus it feels far less leery and creepy for us as players to be horny for them too. These are sexual people, gods who are infamous for their rampant and often unchecked desire. So her main point is that Eve is animated and moves around, whereas the characters in Hades 2 are static. Don't really buy that argument. Doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. I think she's just spouting a bunch of word salad in order to justify her own lust, her own sin. And that's exactly what she is doing. She is lusting after these characters. She admits that when she says here that it feels far less leery and creepy for us as players to be horny for them too. You should not be horny for video game characters, no matter what game they are. And I think there's a very significant difference between admiring beauty, which I do think there is beauty in this character of Eve here, and lust and lust. There's a clear difference. Catholic apologist Jimmy Akin does a really good job of that in this video over here at Catholic Answers back in 2018. He explains that beauty is something that exists in the human form, and God created it, and that's great. So we're not supposed to not recognize it or not appreciate it. So it's perfectly fine to note the qualities, the good qualities that another person has, and to appreciate them. So if you see a beautiful woman and you think, wow, that's a beautiful woman, that's okay. You're not committing a mortal sin. You don't need to worry about that. He then contrasts this with lust, right? Or saying, and so it doesn't become a sin, mortal or otherwise, until you start to voluntarily respond and say, I think I'm going to indulge this. And I think I'm going to start thinking about what it would be like to have sex with this person. When you start getting voluntary about it, when you start going beyond appreciating the beauty and deliberately engaging in lustful thoughts, well, that's where it does become sinful. And even then, it doesn't mean it's a mortal sin, because people, and this is true of both sexes, but it's especially true of guys at a certain point in their lives, it's very easy to unintentionally slip into some thoughts of that nature. And in those situations, there may be some sin, but it's not a mortal sin, because what's lacking is full deliberation. And now I do want to say, I do think there is criticism that Stellar Blade can receive based on the virtue of modesty. I think that is potential based on some of the outfits I have seen, but it's not all of the outfits. And I do think that there is, like I said, beauty to be admired here with this game. Nevertheless, Mercante doubled down on her argument on April 27th. She wrote on X, Baldur's Gate 3 is an RPG which you can have sexual relationships. Customizing your entire character's body, even the genitals, makes sense. You can't one-to-one compare that to other games and the bodies depicted in them that are not RPGs, yet they're trying it. This is where she then claims to be a victim. She says one gust of wind in their house of cards falls every time. Then they get another deck, a new issue to screech about, and build a new one. Rinse and repeat. I draw attention to it because I'm still being endlessly harassed. So there you go. She's playing victim. She's being endlessly harassed, she says, for an article even tangentially related from nearly 2 months ago. where she was defending Sweet Baby Inc., lied about them, lied about the narrative, claimed that Sweet Baby Inc. were the victims when they were the ones going after Cabertus Rainbow, going after the Steam curator list. And she's doing the same thing here, right? Then she concluded saying, just ignore them, or she creates a fake argument. Just ignore them. Not a fake argument, but an argument, I guess. Just ignore them. Okay, sure. And last time we largely ignored them as an industry. They took it as tacit approval. So just saying, I'm not really sure what she's actually talking about there. I think she's just made up something in her mind that didn't actually happen or exist. As far as her argument, it makes absolutely no sense given you compare anything to other things. That's the whole point of comparisons. You're supposed to be making comparisons. That's how they work. So this idea that you can't compare Baldur's Gate 3 to Stellar Blade is just utterly ridiculous. And even if you wanted to get into the nitty gritty of her argument and the claim that you can't make one-to-one comparisons, because that's probably what she's going to try and say, like, oh, well, I didn't say you can't make comparisons. I said you can't make one-to-one comparisons. Well, she did it first. We just went over her whole article. She literally made one-to-one comparisons between Hades 2 and Stellar Blade. And so by her own admission, that I guess that's not really a one-to-one comparison anymore. I mean, you just really can't make this stuff up. These people spout a bunch of nonsense, make themselves try to think that they're being logical or something, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't really compute, doesn't make any sense. Again, for lack of another word to say, it just doesn't. And her own words like kind of expose her own hypocrisy, her own contradictions, and she's just kind of flailing because at the end of the day, what she's really trying to do is just justify her own ugliness, her own sin, her own evil, and we must reject this stuff. And I think like as I said before with other individuals like Alyssa Mercante, she's clearly struggling. She's clearly has a lot of problems interiorly, and we need to pray for her. We need to pray that Jesus Christ softens her heart, that she realizes what she is doing is absolutely wrong and evil, that she repents of her evil ways and comes to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And she will eschew this evil woke ideology that she is promoting, and this promotion of sin, of lust, that she is actively promoting in her words and actions. But let me know what you guys make of what Alyssa Mercante had to say here. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.